Okay, no worries. Thanks everybody for joining the call, and you will have seen the agenda as part of the invitation announcement for this call. We'll have an update from the recent Global Fund board meeting, and we'll start going through those updates by brief updates from each of the three communities of society delegations, starting with the developing country NGOs constituency, represented here by Andre and Carolyn. Then we'll hopefully hear from Rachel on behalf of the communities delegation, and thirdly, the developed country NGOs delegation by Robin. We'll have opportunity for questions and answers following each of the three updates, and then we'll have a further update on Get Back on Track campaign and any other updates that people want to share. So let's not wait any further and start with Andre or Carolyn for the update from the developing country NGO delegation on the Global Fund board meeting.
Yeah, hi, it's Andre on the line. So I would like to introduce myself in new capacity of board member of behalf of developing country NGO delegation, and Carolina's alternate board member. So among our delegation, I'm not sure to what extent actually participants of the call are familiar, but usually we are collaborating very significantly every board meeting and agreeing on the common agenda and pushing for this agenda at various meetings, not only at the board table, but also at the pre-meetings with other delegation, with the entire implementing group, as well as at the bilateral meetings with donors. So we also, all of our delegations are preparing constituency statements where we flag in some priority issues. So at the call, we also will talk on some peaks from our delegations, and it's not necessarily that we are carrying on one thing or another, it's just a division of roles. We are continuing following the board meeting, but for example, we will focus in our update on strategic objective 3, as well as on OAG, and colleagues from communities and developed will follow up on other issues. And of course, we can contribute to each other talks as well, complementing or adding any additional things. So for us, kind of, we try not to dig completely into routine agenda, but also use the opportunity of the strategic update and update from executive director, also to bring everyone's attention that actually Global Fund is underperforming on one of the 4 its strategic objectives, namely on strategic objective 3, focusing on human rights and gender equality. This important strategic objective used to be narrowed to very specific things, like to CRG report, Community Rights and Gender Department report, which is really not fair, because these issues, human rights and gender equality, are not a departmental issue, not just specific, niche area, but it's rather one of the core businesses Global Fund is created for, and got funding from donor to move forward. That's why kind of on numerous occasions we try to bring this attention that strategic objective 3 is actually underperformed by the Global Fund. And well, due to a number of reasons, but actually looking forward, we also highlighted the need to have a deep dive or more in-depth review on all strategic objective 3 work. We also requested for consolidated picture. We are familiar and involved with CRG and quite intensively collaborating with them, but actually strategic objective 3 human rights agenda, it's not a departmental issue, it's across the fund issue. So also we requested the secretariat to have a consolidated picture of this, which departments are involved, what funding is brought in order to achieve these targets. And besides, we also highlighted that as we are underachieving, Global Fund is underachieving on the strategic objective 3. We think that more funds and resources should be put there through the current mechanism, but also through newly approved allocation and especially catalytic investments. Because that's a signal that this area, in order to overcome human rights related barriers, in order to change policy, boost our work on advocacy, we require, or all partners, the funds partners require actually more funding than it provided now. So just to summarize, we provided also specific recommendations on lack of progress on specific KPIs, key performance indicators, not necessarily kind of directly dedicated to human rights, but actually even a bigger picture like lack of progress on preventing new infection, which is KPI number 1, if I'm not mistaken, also to the large extent linked to stigma and discrimination of key populations and existing human rights related barriers. Well, I mean, we also appreciate all the partnership and supporting each other on bringing this agenda forward. Particularly big thanks to communities and developed country NGO delegation for being really firm and strong and going together on this. Definitely, this is kind of not a one-off agenda for this meeting. This is the issue we need to carry forward. Yeah, I think I should stop here, and if anyone have any questions or additions, yeah, please.
Thanks very much, Andre. And perhaps we can go through the 3 updates first, given that they might cover slightly different topics, but also might want to add to the same priorities, because I think that there was quite some alignment in terms of the priorities for this board meeting. I see that Rachel has meanwhile also joined the call, and Rachel Communities was second on the list to provide an update on behalf of the constituency. So if you're good to go, then please go ahead.
Great, thanks so much, Raul. Apologies, I had the email from Tara that had the 23rd on the calendar, and so I haven't been checking emails since I've been back from Geneva. So I've taken time off to do some medical tests. But just thanks so much for joining the call. I'm Rachel Long of the constituency focal point for the communities delegation, and maybe just a very quick summary around some of the main items on top of what Andre had already mentioned. The communities delegation is definitely prioritizes strategic objective 3 in its work areas, as well as one of the focuses. So the couple of focuses at the last board meeting included how some of the documents that came to the board kept highlighting the challenges that were faced around community rights and gender, but there were no strong resolutions, and this has been a systemic problem for the last couple of board meetings. So at this board meeting, we had pushed very much for and worked alongside our colleagues in the other 2 civil society delegations around ensuring that this message was brought clearly at the board level, that we wanted to ensure that the board actually had a good look around why implementation at the country level, or is it a grant making issue, or is it something that is within the grant management department that can resolve some of the issues that we're looking around SO3, as some of the KPIs have in the last 3 years not actually performed around indicators 9. The other areas that the committee's delegation focused on included areas around the allocation methodology, as well as the catalytic investments, which I'm sure Mike will touch on, or Robin will touch on more from the developed country NGO delegation, as they have a seat on the strategy committee. The committee's delegation had some reservations around the allocation methodology, as we were the only constituency that had voted against the allocation methodology when it was first initiated 2 rounds back. In sustaining with that principle, as we believe that the allocation methodology takes away the demand-driven aspect of the Global Fund, the committee's delegation had abstained from the allocation methodology decision point, even though we haven't technically have not had issues with some of the things being proposed, except for the fact that it's an allocated methodology. For the catalytic investments, there were a couple of priorities that the committee's delegation felt uncomfortable with. But this included why certain aspects, including the Technical Evaluation Reference Group, TERG for short, the CCM evolution, the condom programming, were components in catalytic investments. These were areas that we felt should have been taken care of within the OPEX, which is the operational and expenditure budget, and or within country allocations. This is something that we raised very strongly, especially around condom programming, as we understand that prevention needs to be taken, needs to be implemented in countries in a combination method, and not just giving out condoms. In other areas that we had actually been focused on included the recommendation to strengthen committee selection processes, which is a decision point that would relook at the composition or the genetic makeup of each of the committees of the Global Fund. This decision point was, however, pushed back, and we would be looking to the Ethics and Governance Committee for more instructions on how we would move forward and how we can provide further input on this issue. There were some concerns around the report of the Technical Evaluation Reference Group, TERG. One of the recommendations that was made from the TERG included how countries should be able to define their key populations. The communities delegations feels very strongly that key populations is already defined very clearly within the Global Fund and within its documents as the communities or groups of affected communities that are criminalized. This includes sex workers, MSM, drug users, etc. And we had put it very clearly in our community statement that we would not support this recommendation from the Technical Evaluation Reference Group. I will stop there now and check if there are any further questions or clarifications.
Thanks, Rachel. We seem to have lost Raul somehow.
No,
Oh, there he
I'm
is.
still here. Thanks, I was just responding.
Maybe he's fallen asleep because I was so riveting.
Well, I was there for most of it. It wasn't riveting. And thanks for keeping on time, Rachel. You made it. Sorry, inside joke for those who...
Very bad joke, Raul.
Yes, for those who attended the board meeting. We managed to end this board meeting 3 hours ahead of time through some miraculous chairing. Why don't we, if there are no questions at this stage for clarification, why don't we hear from Robin on behalf of the Developed Country NGO delegation? And yeah, and then after
there is a question, Raul.
Yeah.
Do you want? Okay, I will. I think it's Dave Bryden had a question.
Sure.
Yeah, just real quick. I didn't know if maybe this comes up later in our discussion this morning, but right now. But did the board address concerns that have been raised around procurement and co-financing requirements that are leading to problems with procurement and supply? Some of the concerns that MSF and others have raised.
It didn't come up on as a specific dedicated agenda item at the board agenda, nor any extensive discussion as far as I can remember. But perhaps we can get back to the issue in general after the three updates. Rachel, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, sure. So maybe just for, is it David? Sorry, I couldn't catch your name very clearly.
Yeah, David Bryden.
So the issue around procurement and co-financing didn't come out as clear as Raul has said. The issue around procurement and co-financing was much more related to absorption capacity at the board meeting. However, at the upcoming strategy committee, which is going to take place in the first week of July, there will be quite a strong look from the strategy committee in looking at some of the policies that are actually supposed to address procurement and issues, especially around the market shaping strategy. So it might be of your interest to see whether you could provide us feedback or updates prior to that strategy committee meeting, so we can make sure that the issues are raised.
Okay, thank you.
Just to jump in there, hi everyone, it's Robin Montgomery, the alternate board member from the Developed Country NGO delegation. So I echo exactly what Rachel and Raul were saying. The other pieces where procurement did come in were around the OIG report for West and Central Africa, as well as for the strategic reporting, looking at the different key performance indicators around absorption and procurement. But as Rachel and Raul have mentioned, that's a standing item that will come to the strategy committee in July for more fulsome board discussion in November.
If I may add, it's Andre. Also, during the pre-meeting day, there was a session on WAMBO platform, which used for procurement. So recently, strategy committee approved extension of the pilot to 50 transactions. So during that session, some procurement challenges and in particular challenges related to Vamba platform were also brought up.
Yeah. So the review of the market shaping strategy is going to be absolutely critical to this discussion.
Yeah.
And so that should be coming to the strategy committee for discussion for the July meeting at the beginning of July.
Yeah, exactly. So as Rachel mentioned, David and others, this is a key opportunity, and the next couple of weeks therefore provide the perfect window to bring any thoughts around the MSS forward.
Okay, thanks very much.
All right, Robin, shall we go to for the developed delegation update?
Sure, thanks so much, Raul. I'm not going to get too much into the weeds of the allocation methodology and the catalytic investments. I'll speak a little bit more just to some of our key priorities and concerns that were expressed in the pre-meetings, in our bilateral meetings, and at the board table. But perhaps it might be a suggestion that we get together again for a specific GFAN call that looks at the allocation methodology and the catalytic investments. Just as an overview, we completely aligned with communities in developing around the need to have that bigger picture view around strategic objective number 3. We know that the most challenging elements of the strategy are all found in strategic objective number 3 because of their clear linkage to the social and structural drivers of the 3 epidemics. But we are also recognize that there are a number of reports over the last year and a half that help to connect the dots to see where we can be improving our performance. And now at this particular point in time, when we're at midpoint in the Global Fund strategy, it's time that we don't focus on isolated reports and incidents, but we take a step back to see the wider view and ensure that we are making the impact that we are wanting to make. So that was a core theme for our interventions at the board, as was around the quality of services, which is a theme that has consistently come up in OIG reports over the last couple of years, in addition to retention and care. So in the OIG report, we urged the Secretariat to engage more intensively in country-level discussions so that we can identify potential solutions with the involvement of affected communities, civil society, governments, partners, and stakeholders. We also recognized that it's not in every situation that when country teams come to the country that there is a closed session with the FPM and civil society. And so we called for that specifically to ensure that that happens on a more regular basis as a means to really get on the ground information around how community rights and gender are being protected, advanced, and embedded in Global Fund programming. There will be an OIG report coming out over the next month or two that looks specifically at human rights. So that will be a very important report that links into, of course, the broader strategic objective number 3 discussion that we've been having. A second point that we highlighted that we felt was really important within the OIG report and session was to ensure that in our Global Fund messaging that we're not inferring that insufficient HIV incidence reduction, which we see, less than desired progress, but that insufficient HIV incidence is happening because that it's not happening because there has been too much focus on treatment and not enough on prevention. We recognize that HIV death rates have stopped decreasing globally, and that program quality, as I mentioned, is a challenge in many, many countries, which results in high rates of viral load. So poor program quality, in fact, becomes a driver of onward HIV transmission. And so our focus here in that intervention was really making sure that we don't polarize HIV prevention and HIV treatment, that they are part of a broader continuum, and that we must focus all of our programming more comprehensively in order to fix that crisis. In terms of allocation and catalytic investments, first, there was a long discussion at the strategy committee meeting in March on this. And we saw a number of delegations across the board table really express an eagerness to see HIV incidence incorporated into the disease burden parameters. It hasn't for this allocation period, but it will be included in the qualitative adjustments, which is something that I'll get to in just a second. So as a delegation, we supported the burden parameters for this allocation period, largely because we recognize the challenges that are presented to us in terms of the inadequacy of current incidence surveillance data. So on that note, we really stress the importance to ensure that we make progress on this for next time, and that HIV incidence is taken into greater consideration into the allocation equation or formula. So to this end, we asked the Secretariat, in partnership with technical partners, to outline the steps that are needed to ensure that we have reliable incidence metrics and surveillance mechanisms, addressing any necessary country-level capacity needs so that we are well equipped for the next round of allocation. In terms of qualitative adjustments, so this is after the allocation methodology has been run, qualitative adjustments is something that's going to come to the strategy committee for discussion and decision at the July committee meetings. But this was an opportunity at this board to kind of flag what our priorities were around the table when we're talking about qualitative adjustments, with the aim that this would give enough information to the Secretariat to go back and prepare the necessary documentation and scenarios for discussion in July. So we took the opportunity at the board to signal about 4 key priorities. And they are, just quickly, that we fully support the continuation of the key populations incident qualitative adjustment. This is the adjustment where incidence does take a leading factor. We asked for the introduction of a qualitative adjustment to address coverage gaps, to help offset some of the consequences of funding cuts and pace reductions. We also asked for a qualitative adjustment that would account for absorption capacity, both in terms of moving up and down. And finally, with regard to fiscal space analysis, this is something that we've been asking for, and the Secretariat has agreed to, within the qualitative adjustment period, to look at fiscal space analysis. However, in the presentations and in the board documents, that analysis was really just restricted to transitioning countries. So we tried to push that out a little bit more and say that it should be applied beyond transition countries to include a variety of complex contexts where we seek to build sustainability. In terms of catalytic investments for the allocation period, again, it's difficult to go through this without having a full understanding of all of the methodology that went behind it. But just in terms of broad strokes, there were 4 or 5 categories that were, or scenarios that were presented. And in the strategy committee, we really fought for a 900 million scenario, so beyond the 800 million that we currently see in this allocation period. We also fought for the possibility of an additional 1 million to help buffer the steep decline between the 4 or 5 catalytic investment pots. So that was approved, which is terrific. Within that 100 million, we sought to highlight the importance of having the focus be on spending on key populations and human rights components. Just highlighting that that's really an area where catalytic investment can have the biggest impact, particularly in addressing all of what we have been talking about today with regards to strategic objective number 3. With the support of other delegations, we were able to see a friendly amendment to the decision point that called for the review of and the reporting on all catalytic components and initiatives. We recognize that for many catalytic investments, and in particular strategic investments, many of the projects have just started to get off the ground. And we've had more reporting on some than others, but recognize in order for us to have strong oversight as a board and as a secretariat, we really need to make sure that all catalytic components come to the board for review and discussion. We also found within Catalytic Investments a significant agreement around the board table on the need to give some greater visibility and focus on community system strengthening, community responses, and community advocacy and monitoring. So this is the third big key item that was really pushed at this board meeting. The second was quality of programs and retention and care. And the first, of course, was that overarching strategic objective number 3. Yes?
Yeah, just to be mindful of time, I think there's also an opportunity to share the constituency statement or any further notes by email.
Sure, thanks, Raul. Sorry about that. So I'll just quickly move on to resource mobilization then. Just a couple of points. We recognize that this was the first board this is the first board meeting since the release of the investment case and the last meeting for the replenishment. So our key message while we were talking with the Secretariat as 3 civil society delegations was really to have the Secretariat chart its strategy for domestic resource mobilization. And to that end, we called on Peter and his team to develop a comprehensive strategy on domestic resource mobilization, how it's going to work with others, and how it's going to engage with community and civil society, particularly around capacity building and funding of civil society advocacy for domestic resource mobilization. So all of those were really taken on board and will be in development over the next couple of months for a draft presentation at the spring committee meetings. And that's all from me.
Thanks very much, Robin. Before we open it up to the floor, and thanks for covering the broad range of topics, Robin. Before we open it up to the floor, I wanted to give an opportunity for Carolyn from developing country NGOs to speak to the OIG as requested. Carolyn?
Hi, morning everyone. I'm the new alternate board member for the developing country NGO delegations, and I look forward to working with everybody on the call. And in fact, that's the first thing I want to open up with, to just strengthen your knowledge of the fact that the developing country NGO delegation welcomes all inputs from civil society in the developing world, so that we can strengthen our interventions at the table, so that we can know what are the concerns, so that we can take these concerns forward. And in that regard, at this last board meeting, we were able to flag an outreach from Harm Reduction International and a large group of NGOs in Russia. We were able to bring that to the board table to advocate for the continuation of harm reduction services, for the focus to be on funding for NGOs in Russia. And we welcome all of this. Our website is up and functioning, and our Twitter and Facebook is up and functioning. So please reach out to us if there are particular issues you would like to have us focus on or to raise to our attention. Two, just very quickly, the OIG did a very important and very comprehensive report on the activities of the Global Fund in West and Central Africa. It's an excellent report. It is worth reading. We're hoping it will be posted shortly if it hasn't already this morning, but please keep your eyes open. We'll share it. It sets out very clearly some of the failings in the Global Fund's approach, but also some of the really, really strong challenges, and suggests solutions that we could look at when we have underperforming regions as well as underperforming countries. And a couple of other things I want to flag from the OIG, who we have been working quite closely with, that office, and we welcome their openness, that they have started and are continuing to involve civil society in country when they go to do country audits. So if you hear about country audits being done, the OIG will set up opportunities to meet with civil society. Please flag it for us if you see a country audit is going to be done, and you want to be involved. We can raise these things with the OIG and they will seek to have you included. And just very lastly, very quickly, a couple of things are coming up in the OIG report that we haven't seen before. One of them is salary kickback schemes, where people who are working with NGOs or CSOs or even INGOs are asked to donate, in quotation marks, part of their salary back to the organization they work for. And that's a salary kickback, and it's not morally correct, it's not ethically correct, and it's not acceptable. I know sometimes people go with those schemes because they worry about their jobs, but I just want to raise, as the OIG asked us to, that there are protective mechanisms within the Global Fund for whistleblowers, and if you think that something is happening that shouldn't be happening, or if you think that there's an abuse of human rights occurring with Global Fund funded programs, there is a mechanism, the OIG complaints mechanism, as well as there's a way to reach out to the Global Fund to raise that you are concerned about something that's happening in countries. So last but not least, we have closed the book on allocation methodology except for the qualitative adjustments phase. And so just to second what Robin has said and to say that this is an opportunity, please familiarize yourself with what we're talking about, and please send suggestions, input, ideas that you have for how the qualitative adjustments process could be strengthened to ensure that we are meeting and grappling with the barriers, that we are supporting those, providing funding to support those that need it most, and the programs that work most effectively. And I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thanks, Caroline, for that addition. So any questions or comments based on the updates that you've heard on behalf of the three delegations? You can raise your hand via the raise hand function in the webinar, or via the Q&A function. And then Tara will be able to unmute you and get your question out.
So Raul, we have one person, Sophie. She's been unmuted. She may still need to unmute herself.
Sophie, go ahead. You do need to unmute yourself before we can hear you. There we go. Yep.
So some of you have highlighted, thanks everyone for the feedback. It's really great to know what happened. Some of you highlighted the underperformance around strategic objective 3 and noted particularly human rights. And other than the Global Fund approving the matching funds for adolescent girls and young women, did anything else come up around women and gender in this board meeting? So that's my first question. And the other thing I just wanted to pick up on was what some of you have said around not polarizing treatment versus prevention. But, some of the communications that I've seen coming out of the Global Fund recently are very focused on PMTCT, on pregnancy, which I found a bit shocking, because the Global Fund is, I would hope, providing more comprehensive approaches to working towards gender equality. And when I asked, why is this? Why are we seeing, this? The response was, because that's what we've got data on. So I wonder how, we can put on the agenda, how do we move, as we're working towards gender equality and human rights, how do we start to be able to track some of this progress that may be more nuanced and isn't necessarily all about numbers?
Thanks, Sophie. Good point. We did discuss this in various platforms, also in side meetings to the Global Fund board, and it's there's a tension between wanting numbers, because we do need numbers in terms of building the evidence base, and then at the same time, we're also sometimes set ourselves up for failure by being overly ambitious in target setting around, for example, human rights programming, which is incredibly challenging. We did have several conversations with various both board delegations as well as committees and the secretariat around how to go about it and how to strengthen the performance, particularly around strategic objective 3. And I don't know if anyone from the 3 delegations that we heard from or anyone else wants to respond to what Sophie brought forward further.
If I can just jump in here. Hi, Sophie, it's Carolyn. Just to say that the strategic objective 3 is not only human rights, it's human rights and gender. And so that while we talk, we shorten it, we shouldn't be, and acknowledging that. And so we did raise issues around what's happening with the gender and adolescent girls and young women. We also in our delegation spoke to the need for a strategy of assessment and assessing impact and outcomes that includes qualitative as well as quantitative data sources, because right now we actually don't have a way of tracking the catalytic investments or even the allocation methodology that is not focused heavily on numbers as opposed to qualitative type data. And so that is part of our delegation's thinking, has been for a while, and we will continue to push on it, because clearly one cannot, human rights and gender work is not limited to pregnant women, is not limited to adolescent girls and young women, and also includes things like how the Global Fund itself is dealing with issues of gender equality, sexual harassment, etc., both within its grants and at the Secretariat. So welcome any inputs that you think we could take forward on this.
Great, thanks, Carolyn. I completely agree. This is Robin here. Just to add another dimension, which we didn't talk about, but it came up also in a previous question about co-financing. So this also around domestic resource mobilization, we called for the Global Fund to develop a better tracking system so that we see where funds that are coming from implementing governments are going, and specifically to track resources to HIV, TB, and malaria, and then to trickle that down as well to be able to track where investments are going, for example, to community, gender, and human rights. So hopefully over the next 6 months to a year, we'll have better data coming out that can also obviously complement the qualitative stuff that Carolyn was talking about.
Thanks, everyone. Any other questions or comments on this or anything else? Just pointing out then that Sophie, this was also something. This is also going to be a particular area of interest in when we shape the next strategy, which is around the corner, in terms of how to be able to track progress better, in particular in areas such as human rights and gender. Any other questions or comments?
Yeah, if I may.
Anyone else? Yep.
No, yeah.
Andre, go ahead.
It's Andre, yeah. Well, on PMTCT, actually, it was not so much in focus during the board meeting discussion, but generally kind of, yeah, there are still some tensions between treatment and prevention, which we better to address constructively. And looking forward, qualitative adjustments, which will be discussed and agreed during the upcoming strategy committee meeting in mid-July, are really critical to making prevention, especially prevention among key populations, actually, as well as access to treatment for key populations more effectively. At the board table, strategy committee leadership indicated that they are awaiting feedback in the next week or 10 days or in a very limited period of time. So it's also a message to all participants on the call that I think all our delegation, well, of course we will coordinate among ourselves, but we also would like to encourage anyone on the call to share their propositions for qualitative adjustments, including in relevance to prevention and treatment.
Thanks, Andre. A good point. And yeah, I'm reminding us all, I guess, that those adjustment factors are also for adjusting up, not just down. And yeah, let's try our best to avoid ending up in the treatment versus prevention camps again, because this is a debate that that's going to be prioritized further, I think. Another priority in the next period is obviously resource mobilization, as Robin pointed out, that this was the only board meeting since the investment case, and there will not be another board meeting before the pledging conference. So we also wanted to allow a little bit of time for an update on the Get Back on Track campaign and discuss any replenishment efforts. Tara, can I call on you?
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. I'm going to just quickly pop into the a link. It's in the message box. So we have a replenishment tools and resources, which I've shared via our email and etc. So this is where we are hosting all of our tools and resources for the replenishment campaign. If you have something that you've done that you would like added to this, or if you would like, or if you have your own campaign, I'd like to add all of the different campaigns to this site so that there's one place everyone can go to and be like, okay, I can find everything on replenishment here. So that is, and I try to keep this as up to date as I possibly can. I also wanted to let everyone know, I've mentioned it a few times via the listserv, that we have now got our pledge in French. I've also posted that link there, so that if you can share that with your Francophone colleagues, that would be fantastic. So it's the call to action. That would be lovely. We had a really great start to the campaign, but the signatures coming in are slowing down a little. So I would really like to keep momentum up. So if you haven't had an opportunity to share it out, we would very much appreciate you spreading the word. And if we can get our numbers up, and we're tweeting them out and posting them, and the people's comments are also going up on our website. So we're hoping to have a final piece at the replenishment conference. Well, hopefully we'll get a booth, and it will be we'll be able to present kind of what advocates from around the world are saying. So thank you again to everyone who's shared it so far. And if you have any questions or comments about the campaign, please don't hesitate to get a hold of me. I'm happy to respond to questions, or if you want something translated or something, we need some adjustments, just let me know. That's it for me. I just wanted to make one other comment, just to the delegation members, kind of if there's something that GFAN members can do to support the work you're doing at the board, please do let us know. We did hear a few things coming out of this call, but if there's something, please share over GFAN any support that you need, and we can help support your work on the board.
Thanks, Sarah. And just repeating that in the chat box you will see the two links to the resources and the campaign in French, as Tara mentioned. We're coming up to the hour, which is, so we have another 7 minutes for this call as scheduled. So any further questions or comments? Or
Andre, may I? Yeah. I just would like to highlight that we, prior to the call, we shared our delegation statements summarizing our view on the board meeting outcome. So we would appreciate any assistance from GFAN in sharing this further or using other resources. It was sent by Leslie Odendahl, our constituency focal point. So her contacts in this message. So in terms of feeding back in regard to qualitative adjustments or any other things from civil society perspective, as Caroline flagged earlier, please approach Leslie or any of us.
Thank you. I will make sure to include that link when we send around the notes for the call.
Thank you.
Terrific.
Yeah,
Robin here, just perhaps in advance, we do have time before the July strategy committee meeting, so perhaps it would be helpful to have a call specifically looking at some of the key issues that are going to be discussed, in particular the qualitative adjustments.
Thanks, Robin. Rachel, anything to add from your side? And otherwise, anyone on the call, please let us know if you want to raise anything by either the raise hand function or via the chat box or via the Q&A function in the Zoom webinar. Rachel?
I think Rachel must have had to drop off the call.
Oh, yep. Like it. I don't see any other hands raised or questions come up.
I don't see anything either.
So, and then maybe in line with the timekeeping results of the board meeting itself, looks like we'll manage to end this call ahead of scheduled time and not run over. It is going to be a critical period for us to keep checking in with each other as we get closer to the Replenishment conference. And obviously also, as was mentioned by several of us in this call, the committee meetings before that are going to be critical for some of the areas that were discussed by the different representatives from the three delegations. So I do look forward to your continued engagement over the next period of time. So thanks very much, in particular to the people who presented on behalf of the communities and civil society delegation, and everyone for attending the call. And I look forward to speaking with you again soon.
Thanks, Raul. Thanks, Tara. Thanks, everybody. We look forward to hearing from you. Bye.
Bye. Thank you, Raul.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Everyone.
Bye. Reach out to us. Bye.